Welcome, everybody. My name is Laura. I am the co-founder and CEO of the ArtB Initiative program. We are here today to have a really exciting and real insider talk with an amazing creative director at one of the agencies part of the Omnicom group, who is a huge communication conglomerate I'm sure you might have heard of. So welcome to our speaker, Kevin, of course, who is here. Kevin is a legend. Sorry, that's my term. So Kevin is a CD creative director for Tracy Locke, which is an agency part of the Omnicom group. He's got a decade of experience working for major brands like Samsung, Audi, Krispy Kreme, and he's also running this awesome YouTube channel called Open Door Creative. If you guys don't know about it, go ahead and click follow, because there's so many great career buildings videos. And also Kevin wrote an awesome book that he'll talk about called Breaking into Art Direction: How to Build Your Portfolio and Land a Job in Advertising. So he's the perfect person, for us to chat with today, to kind of hear a little bit about, how things are, and, what do we need to see for creatives and how to get in. So for this rundown, before we get to Kevin, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Before we get to you, Kevin, I want to explain a little bit about how this event's going to go. The first part is going to be, I have a few questions for Kevin that I want, that I really think would be really helpful for all of you guys to hear about. So we'll go through that first. Afterwards, we'll open it up to a Q&A for everyone. Okay, so that's why I really want you, while I'm asking you to stay on mute, I really want you to be asking a lot of questions in the chat. Be active there. We will try to get to them. We'll do a break at one point to introduce a little bit more about what the ArtB Initiative program is, so that you can understand. Actually, Kevin is one of our esteemed coaches for the program. So Kevin can also maybe talk a little bit about what he's doing during our portfolio review sessions that we're organizing with our participants. And then we'll get back to any questions that you have, whether it's going to be about the program or final questions for Kevin as well. So Kevin, thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Well, why don't we kickstart things a little bit? Like, why don't you give us the spiel? Tell us a little bit about, who you are. We want to hear a little bit more about your background. That'd be awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, like a general creative, I do have a deck, so we will be looking at slides. So let me share my screen. We'll jump right into it. All right. Can you see my screen?
You can.
All right. Portfolio seminar. That's why we're here. I am Kevin. Laura already did a great job of introducing kind of a little bit of everything about me, but just a snapshot of it a little bit more. I work for Tracy Locke under Omnicom. From the commerce space, we deal with a ton of great clients that we've had the pleasure of working with, from Pizza Hut to Audi to Samsung, on a little French bistro called La Madeleine right now, working on Tito's, touching a lot of brands amongst a lot of industries, which is why I love doing what I do, right? There's constant challenges as, I progressed through my career. And it's kept me kind of engaged and just as excited as right when I jumped in. To plug the YouTube channel again, because you can never plug it enough. Open Door Creative on YouTube, have about 150 videos, from tips and tricks that I wish that I would have known getting into the industry, to design challenges, to portfolio critiques, to interviewing other creative directors and art directors that have gotten into the industry, and kind of following their journey as well. Obviously, we are all at different points of that journey, a lot of us at the beginning, and I think it's very important to know that everyone gets there in a kind of different way, in a unique way. And so I double tap into that as well. And then thank you for buying the book. I saw it. That was great. Do have a book on Amazon. It's $19.99. I dive deep into the emotional state of a creative, because I think that's vastly important and very much underlooked within a lot of university courses. I talk about my own process of coming up with ideas, and then I have 50 mini creative briefs and different projects to help somebody actually build their portfolio from scratch. Artbound's a great, opportunity too, to kind of get in, and, all of these different resources are available at your fingertips now to make it you may not get there the most traditional way anymore, which is fine. I think that is actually how most people get in now. You got to get a little crafty. So we're here today to talk about the portfolio. So I'll belabor this slide slightly, but your portfolio is the single most important thing to getting you that internship or job. It's your body of work, it's your proof of skill set, it's the culmination of all of your experience, and it represents you as an artist. And I think that part's important too, and I'll get a little bit more into that in a second. Ultimately, a CD or somebody reviewing a hiring manager or somebody reviewing your portfolio, this is what determines whether you come in for that interview. So resumes, we've been told our whole life, how important resumes are. They're important. I would say your portfolio is 10 times more important than any resume. Not only that, your portfolio is here for the long haul, right? It is not something you build once, get a job, and then you're like, later portfolio. It's one of those things that sticks around. So as you grow and change, as you progress through your career, your portfolio does the same thing. A new shiny campaign comes around and then an old campaign kicks the dirt, right, from your portfolio. So that back and forth of, putting new stuff in and taking old stuff out is something that you'll definitely experience a lot. So as you can tell from the YouTube channel, the book, the name of this seminar, this portfolio thing is pretty crucial. I feel that it's very important, if not the most important thing. So I'm going to go through and spiel through a bunch of tips and important things I think you should know when you're building your own, right? And the first one is actually centered around this idea of 3 to 5 minutes. 3 to 5 minutes is how long a reviewer or creative director or hiring manager will probably spend on your portfolio. And that is scary, but also an important thing to think about when you're designing yours, right? You don't want it to be so hard to get through to where, they're going to spend those 3 minutes and you maybe only made it through one section of work. So ultimately, when you're designing your portfolio, it is not designing it for you, you're designing it for them, right? The goal is always to get across the most amount of thinking, the most amount of design in the most bite-sized and easily digestible way possible. So for example, I see a lot of portfolios. I am a reviewer for Artbound, and one of the things I see a lot is the project descriptions, right? They get a little lengthy sometimes. We're not there to read novels. We have to get to the work, the meat of what we're looking at. So really start to see your portfolio as a highlight reel. You are showing the best pieces that you can in the best light, and then you're, telling them to get the hell out of there at that point, basically. So you want them to gain as much value, as much insight to who you are, and then, the rest is history. A question I get frequently asked is how many projects should be in my portfolio before I start applying? Most people will say there's no real number. I say bullshit. It's 5 to 6. That's the magic number. I believe that you need enough work so that someone can see the breadth and range of your skill set, right? Now, with that being said, you will always only be judged by your weakest piece. So though you want 5 to 6 projects, if you feel like one project kind of sort of sucks, don't be afraid to delete it. That's okay. That's totally fine. Ultimately, you only want to show your best stuff. You have to kind of think of it like this. With that 3 to 5 minutes, if a reviewer is going to click on a project in your book at random, because in that 3 to 5 minutes, they may only make it through about 3 projects, right? Will you be happy with what they click on? And a lot of times people are like, oh, well, I hope they don't click on that one. Then don't show it. That's okay. Again, you're showing your best work, and self-editing is something you're not just going to have to do in your portfolio. You're going to have to do it constantly on the job. You're going to come up with 5 different versions of something, and then, you don't want to overwhelm the client. So you might only present 2 or 3. And so that self-editing is something that you'll continually practice, not just for your portfolio, but once you get into the career itself. Range. It's on here 3 times. I would put it on here 100 more times if I could. Your range of skill set is one of the most important things that your book can produce, right? Are you working on a range of brands? Are you working on a large durable brand, a small disposable product? Are you playing in different product categories, right? And also, is your target market the same every time? You should be able to advertise the same to your friend as you do to grandma, right? Those are important. It's important to have that range and target. A lot of portfolios come through where the person making it is the target market. I think that is not the best idea. I personally, when I started, had a campaign for Sephora. I'm not a makeup guy personally. That's just me. But I had a makeup brand. I was able to dive into that target, have a good strategic insight, and sell myself to that creative director right off the bat. Another thing about range is style, right? No two campaigns should have the exact same design style. You would not design a campaign for Pepsi the same way you would for Nike as you would for Krispy Kreme. You just wouldn't, right? They have their own aesthetic that you want to make sure when someone looks at your portfolio, they're like, oh, okay, they've dabbled in a little bit of everything. Maybe you had illustration heavy in this campaign, and maybe you went photography heavy in the other, right? And that range is really important to show. And it's not just a range of project, but it's also a range of media. Are you showing out of home? Are you showing social? Are you showing experiential? Are you showing print, digital? Like, we're in a realm now where an idea no longer has to exist in one particular medium. You should really think about your work in a 360-degree lens. A lot of times I'm reviewing portfolios and I'm like, wow, this is a really great print series, right? I have 3 print ads. They are absolutely fantastic. But what would you do on social that's part of this campaign? What would you do out of home? What would you do, on mobile? Like, what would you do? How can you push this a little bit further? And re-looking at your work and being like, how could I, make this even 10% better? Does a lot. It does a lot because it shows a range of thinking and that you're thinking strategically just past one particular piece of medium. But overall, the idea is always vastly, vastly important. So with a show of virtual hands that I cannot see, because all I can see is my slide, which of these do you feel like is most important? The spoiler is that both of them, they are both important. They are equally important. I would give it a 50-50 split. There is no design on the planet that has, if it has a bad concept, that is an effective piece of advertising. And there is no concept that if designed poorly is groundbreaking. They really do need each other, and it's important to look at that work through that lens so that you're really getting that balance, getting that best of both worlds. And I think it's important to judge our work that way. One thing I'll mention is, obviously getting your portfolio critiqued and reviewed is very important. Other than your parents telling you how awesome your book is, when, they may not know, or you judging your work yourself, getting that book in front of a lot of industry experts and other people who have been doing this is only beneficial. I personally, before I even got into the industry, I sent my portfolio out to 100 creative directors. I only got like 15 or so replies, but that was enough for me to see what things were consistent and how people were talking about my book, what things people really gravitated towards. I actually started to move those to the top of my portfolio, did a little rearranging. So all of that is vastly important. But something I tell in every single one of my portfolio critiques is ultimately, again, it's a representation of you and your work. If you love something, keep it. I will always stand by a creative standing by their work. That is something that I will always be a proponent of. So, even if you get a bad comment from somebody, if you don't agree, like, that's okay. Now, if you start to get the same comments from everybody, then you might have to have a real heart-to-heart with yourself and make a change. But for the most part, get that book out and take that feedback to heart. I already hinted at this, but I have it on a slide by itself for extra emphasis because I feel like it is that important, is to only show your best stuff, right? There are no handouts in your portfolio. We start to romanticize our work a lot, especially early on. We take it kind of personal. These pieces of work, these designs kind of become our babies. And we don't want to kill those babies. We want those babies to live a long life in your portfolio until they're old and gray. But unfortunately, that's not reality all the time. As your skills get better, you'll even look at your stuff and be like, yeah, okay, I thought it was good before. Maybe it's not where it needs to be anymore, especially as a new piece of work enters the neighborhood. It's like, are you going to evict one of your old ones so this like really shiny, awesome piece can, take a spot? And that's how you should look at it. Make sure it's responsive. I was gonna make up a stat that like 84% of people look at, portfolios on their phone. I don't have stats, and I wouldn't believe it probably if I did find one. But what I will say is, you don't know when somebody is reviewing your book. So though they're reviewing your book probably on desktop because they're at work and probably on their big screen, there are still those where maybe it's more convenient when they're at lunch and they pull it up on their phone. And that experience should be just as important and crucial than just having, your portfolio from a desktop perspective. All right, the About Me. This is a section to me that is the most underrated section. A lot of people really don't give it the light of day. They're like, oh, it's very, very common that I hear something around, I'm an extremely passionate designer who loves art, and I strive to push my creativity every day, which are great things. I'm glad you're doing that, but everybody is saying that, right? So when you look at your About Me section, really try to infuse it with the personality, with who you are, the human, the person that they will actually be working with on the day-to-day, right? And I think that's vastly important and underrated, is that, we may think your work's awesome, but we kind of don't want to work with jerks or people that sound conceited, or, we like quirks. It's a creative industry, and in most creative industry, like, that's cool. Weird is in. I went to school in Austin, Texas, and it's keep Austin weird is the saying, and I'll live by that for the rest of my life. So that personality, that realness is also important just as much as the work. Lastly, before we kind of get into the Q&A section, is make it easy to connect. You wouldn't be surprised how many portfolios I look at where I have to really look around and dig and deep dive and scroll to the bottom of pages to find a contact information. If I want to contact you because of your portfolio, I should be able to do so in the easiest way possible. So yes, vastly important. I know I've said the word important on basically every slide, but I feel that strongly about everything that I'm showing today. So speaking of, connecting, obviously we're gonna get to Q&A here in a second. We're gonna kind of spiel through more questions and then, learn about the program. But overall, after this presentation, if you do want to contact me, opendoorcreative.com. I have a contact form of my own. Of course, I'm on the LinkedIn, and there's a little link to the channel, and my book's on Amazon. So that's my quick spiel, so that we have plenty of room for questions.
I love it, Kevin. Thank you so much. This is really great. And I'm already seeing some really good questions here, and probably a lot of questions about portfolio. Can I do a twist? And because I have some portfolio questions for you, and I know we talked about this a little bit, but can I do a twist and talk a bit about, just because you gave some really good already some feedback about that, and I know that our participants will have further questions on it. But I want to ask you a question about mindset, because I think that's something that you've touched upon a lot. I've checked out a lot of your videos, and obviously, since we got you as a coach, that's something that we talked about. But what do you feel like should be the mindset, of a fresh, like, kind of new creative coming into the field?
100%. Number one is the sponge mindset, right? You're a sponge. You're not expected to know everything on day one. At least myself, I was so nervous on my first day. I had actually already written out a bunch of ideas for the brand that I was going to be on. I was going to be on Samsung, and I'm like, I'll just make a bunch of campaign ideas for this. Once I got in, none of that was needed. Obviously, I did a lot of homework that was unnecessary, but I was just so nervous and was like, maybe I'll come with something and they'll think I'm good. You're hired for a reason. I think that's really important to grasp. You weren't hired because they think you're an idiot. So, don't be afraid to show your POV, to put yourself, forward, and to learn as much as possible. Ask a ton of questions. I never get, bothered by questions. I am much more bothered when the questions aren't asked, and then I'm like, well, why didn't you just ask me that? And I would have told you. And we would have got to the answer a lot quicker. So the sponge mentality is real, but I also know that as creatives in general, imposter syndrome is real. And it's not just when you're starting, it is all the way through. I've been in this industry over a decade now. I still feel like I suck all the time. You'll win awards, you'll get all the accolades. Your agency will give you the good old promotion, and you're still like, but what have I done lately? Like, I don't feel, and that's the creative curse. Like, that's just what it is. And it's important to know that, because when you know that everyone kind of feels that way, it makes it a little bit of an easier burden to carry. But yeah, I'd say really, the mindset to me is to go easy on yourself. When you get in, like, again, you're not expected to know everything. And it's okay to fumble, right? You're there to learn. You're not there. Everyone fumbles to some degree. And that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to have, something that you can point to that you're like, I learned from that, and that made me better.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for being real about this. I think
Yeah,
imposter syndrome is forever. It's just like
100%.
you gotta deal with. So Alyssa asked a great question that I was actually one of the questions that I wanted to ask you as well, is like during a portfolio review, and I think let's bring it, let's kind of even open it more. But Alyssa is asking, during a portfolio review, do you look for perfection or potential in a junior creative? And I kind of had a question as well for you that was like, what are you, when you're looking for portfolios in your agency, right? When you're recruiting juniors, like what are you looking for? So I think those questions are actually perfect together.
Totally. Yeah, I think I have a couple things on that. Potential is always the most important. Unless you're going for like a senior art director or an associate creative director or creative director position, you don't have everything figured out yet, and that's okay. I will rarely look at a book, because one thing I see a lot, right, is people will create campaigns with exorbitant, like crazy budgets, like out of this world budgets, where we're like, oh, like logistically, like we probably couldn't get that done. We turn that off right away. Like, that's not something we think about. I think from my perspective, does it look like you put in the work? Do you, part of my language, do you give a shit? Like, I love to know that somebody really cares when they come in. I will hire passion over skill set every time. Something me and my old creative director used to always say is, I would rather the like second or third best player than like the MVP on the team, because they might have an ego, and a creative position is one that should be egoless. I will admit that when I first started, I thought I super sucked, but then I did okay, and I was like, maybe I'm good, and I got a little full of myself, if I'm being honest, and I was like, okay, like chill out. Like, there's a lot of talent around you, and then it's starting to look around and be like, wow, like look at how good that person is. I wish I had those kinds of skills. And again, that sponge mentality. But yeah, passion, number one, most important. I think the other thing to realize too, to go back to the question about like the getting it, like what to look for in a book and things of that nature. I think it's also important to know that a common thing that you'll see in a lot of books is some people, show very easily if they care, because there are some portfolios and some campaigns you'll look in and I'm like, did they really try on this? Did they go deep enough? And I would rather you go deep in thinking than even execution, because at least for me, when I started, I had such an idea in my head that I wanted to bring to life, but I just didn't have the skill sets to actually make that come to life in the best way possible. So I did my best. So that potential to me in thinking is probably more important than an execution. So I know I said 50-50 on that other slide. But if you don't have your design chops, fully tightened and in a nice little bow, I think that's okay too.
Right. Right. That's a great comment. I think it's important specifically because everybody here is like, beginning, right? So it's like, what do
Yeah.
you focus on? There's so many great questions, guys. I'm going to take some of the general ones first so that it can apply to everyone. Elizabeth is asking, can you talk a bit more about the work environments of agencies? Like, and how do we set ourselves up for success coming into this industry? I think it's a great question because a lot of people here are probably trying to get into those agencies or beginning there.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, it's a hustle and bustle place. I will say it is going to depend on the shop. So if you're at a smaller agency, things are going to be a little bit different than a larger agency. If you live in New York, it's going to be a little different than if you live in Dallas. So location actually does play a role. And it really boils down to client expectation. So when you get to, a place, the agency environment is usually very, friendly and easygoing, at least from a personnel perspective. I go to work in jeans and a t-shirt, and I love that I can do that. And that it's very like calm and relaxed. Your team ends up kind of being like your family. It's a very family-oriented environment. But a lot of that family building comes from y'all were in the trenches together for a real tough campaign, or there was a project that, maybe the client didn't love the first time and you really had to nail it, and then you did, and you kind of get this like win together. You'll do client pitches and things like that to get new business. And winning one of those is like, our Super Bowl. Like, it's so exciting when you like win a piece of business. So yeah, generally like, in every interview that I've done, usually a question I get is, how's the culture at your agency, right? And to me, like, that is what has kept me around the agency I'm at, for so long, because I'm going on 10 years now at Tracy Locke. Before that, I was at a smaller shop for 3. But what has kept me there is the people. The people are the culture. It's not that we have a ping pong table. We do have one of those, but it's about the people, and the closeness, and that's what makes even the late nights a lot easier to digest and handle, because you guys are kind of working as a team and getting things done. I think it also is important depending on who's leading the ship, right? Like your GCD, your creative directors, if they have their stuff figured out, they can do a great job of advocating for you. Something I tell my team all the time is, if you're feeling burnt out, because it can be a lot at times, it can be a lot. If you're feeling burnt out, or you're just not inspired at the moment, or your workload is just too much, it's okay to raise that red flag. It doesn't look negatively on you, as a lot of people might think. Because we are all very, as a creative, you're in your emotions a little bit. Like, when a client comes back and says, we weren't really leaning towards any of the stuff you presented, that's kind of a hit to your ego. And you're like, oh gosh, like, we worked really hard on that. And so those times, are a little tough. And then sometimes things will go your way. It'll be great. And then you'll have tons of free time. And you're like, what is this? Like, at the beginning of the year, I'll say that too. The overall culture ebb and flows, from a work perspective. Sometimes you're like, out of your mind busy, and then sometimes you're like kind of relaxed, and you're like, oh, maybe I'll take a tutorial or do something during this time. So that does vary as well.
You're like, oh wait, I'm not like overwhelmed. What can I add?
Yeah, exactly. What is this feeling? Yeah.
So Tanvi is asking, like, what's the best way to frame and include like speculative projects in the portfolio as a junior creative? And maybe Kevin, can you explain just in 1 second what's a spec project for everyone, in
Yeah.
case it doesn't
Yeah,
know?
essentially spec project's a fake project. It is for a real brand, but you kind of just took a brand and created a campaign with it, or designs for it, or ads, for it. Spec work is not weird to see when you're a junior. We're used to seeing it because you don't have experience yet with real brands. And honestly, you might have some of those spec campaigns in your portfolio for the first couple years that you're at an agency anyway, because not all agency work is glamorous, right? You're going to work on a couple projects a year where you're like, oh yeah, that's a portfolio piece. Like, I'm going to put that, it's going to get its own nice, beautiful section, and it's going to be great. But 75% of the other work, you're making stuff that, you're like, oh, this is not as bad as, doing finance. No offense to finance people. But you're like, at least I get to be creative, and I'm making, you're making ads, but not every ad is going to be a book piece. And that's something that you realize pretty quickly, for sure. Did I answer what was the root of the question again?
I think the question is like, what's the best way to frame and include, right? So what
Yes.
I'm hearing is like, yes,
Yeah.
definitely an okay to include spec projects, right? So do you have to notify, do you have to say it up front? I mean, I'm guessing you have to say up front that it's a spec project, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of unwritten rules with portfolios. One of them being, say if it's spec. I think when you are coming out of school, this is just my personal opinion. Everyone has their own opinion on it. I personally don't think it's that necessary to be like, this is fake. You want to put your best foot forward. You want to be as real as possible. In your about section, please don't say I'm a student. that's trying to just be like, I'm an art director, or I'm a say what you're going for. Like, what are you? And put that. Even if sometimes you work in the land of make believe, that doesn't mean you have to present yourself that way. There are a lot of spec campaigns that I've seen where I'm like, wow, this is just badass work. And I don't need to know that it was, necessarily fake. So I wouldn't worry about framing it up any particular way. Another unwritten rule that you'll find a lot is, crediting people, right? So it is important if you didn't do the majority of a project to be like, oh, well, these people also assisted on this project in various ways. So definitely, give kudos to your fellow copywriters or fellow designers or, whoever worked with you on something.
Love that. I think that explains it a lot. And I think this is something that we talk a lot about in the program as well. We always ask, like, please add spec projects. We want to see more.
Yeah.
We want to see more of that. Guys, I want to do a 10-minute just intro about the program. We have so many great questions. I want to come back to them. But I think that's a good moment to kind of pause and just introduce a little bit more about, like, how for you, Kevin, as well, how you've been involved in the program. We have some of our participants here, guys, so bear with us. We're coming back to your questions. You all already know the spiel about us, but let me just introduce for those who are who don't know about us what we're doing here. So just to kind of re-explain here, this is presented, this webinar is presented by ArtB Initiative, and what we are is that we're a program that helps people break into the creative field. So obviously Kevin and I, when we connected, there was like a lot of alignments here. We were like very much on the same mission. We know those fields are very much about who you know and insular. So we're trying to create opportunities and help, support you guys. And that goes through 4 main key components for us. First is obviously personalized coaching, the same way that, we bring in people like top from the field, like Kevin, that are having like one-on-one conversations with you to guide you guys. That's a really important thing for us. We also offer a guaranteed internship placement, as well as like some support for you throughout the entire journey, and also a lot of networking opportunities. So we have different destinations. We're not in Dallas yet, but we're in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Berlin, Melbourne, Sydney, and we also offer a virtual program for those who are not potentially able to relocate, right? Because it takes some bucks to be able to move out in another city. So we have different industries, right? I'm guessing all of you today are more interested in the advertising, right? Kind of world, marketing, but we also have opportunities in entertainment and media, obviously design, fine arts, and fashion. Those are the 5 places that we kind of cater to. We have a laundry list of internship types. I'm not going to talk about them right now, but highly recommend for you guys to check out, our website so that you can really see, all the different types of stuff that we offer. Yeah, so go ahead and check us out on that. I will leave it just for a second in case you want to look for it, but then we'll go a little bit quickly on that. So the first component of the program is our coaching. So for example, actually I didn't add Kevin here because we already had Kevin here, but you can see some of our other coaches that are there. People from Warner Bros, people that were actually also Omnicom, Tim Young, one of our senior recruiters, ex-WPP, Joanne Morgans from Vice. So we offer coaching before we get you guys an internship. We have a curriculum that's online with 10 modules. Nothing is theoretical in what we do. It's all pragmatic stuff. It's all the things that we're trying to really help you to get into the industry and bridge that between your school and actually entering your career. So it's going to be resume reviews, portfolio reviews with Kevin if you're lucky, industry insights. We'll pair you as well with a recruiter to do some mock interviewing, because learning how to do a job interview is definitely an art form, right? We'll make sure that your materials look flawless, that your resume is looking good, that your portfolio is looking good. Once we do that, we're going to start then to prepare you for the workplace, right? There were some questions about like, how is it? And there's some questions about hard bosses, which we'll get into afterwards. We're going to prepare you for that in terms of like understanding what are the soft skills that you need to really excel in the workforce. So it can be understanding what type of managers you might get, how to write good business emails, how to show up in an office environment and actually look engaged, and how to ask the right questions, all those little things that you typically learn in the first 2 years of your career. We've condensed it. And so that way you can show up at this internship and be maybe 10 times better than the other interns who didn't get that preparation, right? That's the goal. At the end of that curriculum, you'll get also a certification that you can add on your resume and your LinkedIn as well in career development. It's a certificate. So that's the first part. The second part is that we guarantee an internship offer. Okay, so we have, our internships that we organize with our companies are going to be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. You can do it for credit if you want with your school. If they arrange it, we can help you guys arrange it. The one thing that we say upfront and that we're very transparent about is that we can guarantee paid internships. We wish one day we'll be there, but we're not. We're, in industries that are very difficult to get and still running a bit behind, although advertising is slowly doing a bit of a better job in that. But, of course, like other areas are a little bit harder to catch up. So we do say to all of our, applicants, like if an unpaid internship is a deal breaker, we totally understand it. But then that's not the right program for you, because we don't want to, put you guys in a tough financial spot. So it's a program that requires financial planning ahead. Okay, you need to think it through and verify that you've got, the funds. Some of our, previous internship placements in some of those very big companies, which is really cool. But we also have a lot of super awesome medium boutique firms as well that are really great. And then Kevin, I know you started your career in a smaller shop, right? There's a lot of value into starting in smaller firms too, because you're getting very much a hands-on experience and a lot more exposure. Maybe, I don't know if you have something to say about that, Kevin, afterwards, but we can talk a bit about the difference between the smaller shops, right?
Yeah.
So that's the placements. Then just a couple examples of like the companies that we have. So Factory PR, for example, in LA, Atlantic Pictures production company in New York City, where you can do like production, video editing. Picture North, iconic post-production companies in Chicago, where you can do some like post-production and production work. Studio Aventi, really cool creative agency. You should check it out, Kevin, in Berlin. Super cool kids, like doing a lot of really great projects, like art direction internships, animation, motion. So that's just to give you a little kind of, example of 4 companies. So if you're relocating, okay, if you're going overseas, we are going to handle everything in terms of the visa processing. We'll get you insurance, we'll get you housing, we'll make sure that you're situated, right? That can also work if you live, for example, in Dallas and you want to go to New York. We can also help you for the housing, for example. We can also hook you up with one of our housing providers, so that way you have a short-term rental and it's not complicated. So there's a whole kind of, I guess, support system to help you guys to relocate. The other thing is that whether you relocate or not, whether you do it virtually, you're going to have a lot of support through the program. So for example, if one of our participants, and I think we have several of them here, if one of our participants is going through the program, they're going to have a dedicated coordinator that's going to help them through the entire process, through the curriculum, through setting sessions with Kevin, through like organizing interviews with companies, and then until the very end, like to kind of know how is your internship going, what are your challenges, like what's good, we want to hear, and we're going to be there to help you. And then on top of that, you also have an in-city coordinator. So let's say you go to LA for your internship, there's going to be somebody locally in LA that's going to help you navigate the local scene. Typically, we try to take locals, obviously, so that they know what's up, and they will be there to really help you, just emergency contact, but also doing a bunch of meetups. Then the final thing of the program is the community. And that's the biggest part. And I know that here, I'm really happy to see that we have also some of our alumni who did the program a couple of years back. We're very strong for our alumni network. That to me is what you're investing in this program. An internship is great, but it's 3 months. A network is, priceless, and really what's going to make you get jobs, really. I mean, we're having our alumni coming up now with jobs, and they're hiring our interns, and like it's this kind of circular, I guess, project that we're building where everybody's getting with each other to the top. So we organize, monthly events. We have webinars with awesome people like we have today. And then we also share resources. We have our own app, which you see here. And then, that's a lifetime membership app, and you can just access it at any time and chat with our members. So that's a little bit more about the program. Now let's talk about the financial part of it, because as I mentioned, it requires planning, and like anything, like any school, like any, certifications, you need to make sure and verify that this is the right thing for you and that this is the right investment for you, right? So we have 2 different types of tuitions. We have one that is for local and virtual programs, which is $2,250. For those who are not in the US, this tuition pricing is, just so you understand, is about the pricing of one course in a US, institution, right? So we've lined it up this way to make it easier for students to understand. That includes everything that we talked about, from the internship placement to all the curriculum that we're offering to all the support and the network and the events, everything's included. For the international program, it takes a little bit more funds to be able to do it. It's $1,000 more, $3,250, and that's because we're doing a lot more heavy lifting in terms of the relocation processes with you guys. And I want to add that for international programs, please plan it, because there's a lot more expenses. Okay, like you're gonna have to pay flights, and you can ask us. We have a lot of great resources for that. Verify that you've got the budget. If you do, best experience possible, but verify that you're able to make it happen. We have some scholarships on our website listed. We have different payment options. You can kind of pay in installments as well to break it down. We're trying to make things, we know that you guys are starting in life, and we know that you're going to need to kind of have a bit more time potentially to go through the tuition. So we are also helping, in kind of breaking things down. And as I mentioned, we do also have scholarship options that you should check out on our website. So that's a little bit more. The last thing that I want to say is, just because it's important to talk about, we have an application deadline that's coming up. Our summer program, our local summer program. Overseas already is closed. But if you want to do something, if you're in the US, for example, and you want to do something in New York, LA, Chicago, you can apply until February 15. If you're outside and you want to do something virtual, you can apply until February 15. If you're in Australia and you're going to do Melbourne, Sydney, you can also apply until February 15. So just putting that in your mind, you have about, I guess, 13 days to get it ready. And for our application, you'll just submit a form. You'll get on an interview with us. We'll let you know if you got accepted or not. And then if you got accepted, you can make your decision whether you want to join. So that's a little bit more about the program. I wanted to kind of have a chance to explain who we are. Kevin, maybe before we get back to questions, and guys, if you have any questions also about, the program, I mean, if anybody has questions about the program, I can answer them. But Kevin, do you want to tell us a little bit more about, like, how, just briefly before we get to the other questions, like, how has it been for you, your experience in, like, doing those portfolio reviews with our candidates? And I know you and I are very much, as I mentioned, aligned in our missions to, help the next generation get in, right? So I'd love to hear your experience too.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I love it so far. Have had a lot of portfolio critiques now, and just seeing the exchange of value. Like it's that one-on-one experience that I wish I would have had coming in, because ultimately, I sent my book out to a lot of people, and even those few that did respond, they didn't deep dive. What I've been really trying to do, and I focus on, and how I approach the critiques, is when I know I'm, going to critique somebody's book, I sit down with it beforehand. I write a lot of notes. I'm a note taker, so I get everything down, because it is a deep dive. So when I go through that portfolio, it's not just live, like, oh, you should move this here, you should do that. Like I go deep. I read everything, I look at everything, and then when we have that session, it's how can I provide as much value as humanly possible to help somebody get a little bit further. And that's what I've always kind of wanted to do, from starting the channel to the book. It's like, if I can help one person break into this crazy game of advertising that we're in, I've done my job, and I feel good about it. And this has really given me the opportunity to be able to do that.
I love that. I love that. I think that's we're so lucky to have you, and so fortunate to have you as a coach. I think it's just such a game changer for many students and fresh grads who are entering, to kind of have somebody who's like a CD level, take a look at their stuff. I mean, that rarely happens. You know what I mean? So I think it's so cool. And I think it's very unique in that sense. I'm very proud that we were able to offer that for our participants.
Totally.
I have a question. I have two questions from Lauren. One about the program, and then one for you, Kevin. So Lauren's asking, will you be notified in the same acceptance email that we've received the Art scholarship? That's a great question. So we do offer scholarships, as I mentioned. We make our scholarship decisions every quarter. So no, unfortunately, the timing might not line up from the time of your acceptance, where you actually need to make a decision, to the time that we're going to decide who's getting the funding. We're trying to play a fair game. So we have to gather all scholarship applications for that quarter, which is the 3 month. And then afterwards, once we have everybody, we review and we allocate the funding. So the only thing is that you need to be able to, join the program. You might or might not get. That's very typical for scholarships and grants. Unfortunately, typically you have to start it and then know later what's going on. So yes, Lauren, I hope that answers your question. So typically you will need to move forward first with the program, and then a little bit later on, once we end that quarter, you will know whether you got some funding or not. So I hope that clarifies it. And then Lauren, you had another question you had also a lot of great questions, but I think there's one that could be quite interesting for everybody. Lauren's asking you, like, Kevin, have you ever like come across those hard to understand bosses where it's kind of like, a lot of tests and like a lot of, walking on eggshells, like kind of in the shows, like kind of what we see in the shows and the movies, right? Is that an experience that you had to navigate, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I have been very fortunate. I've had a lot of really great bosses that have really put a lot of time into my growth and development. I try to play the same game for everyone that that works for me and or with me, I should say, as well. Now, you're not going to love everybody. You're going to have some friends, you're going to have some people that you're like, oh, they're fine. Not everyone needs to kumbaya all the time. But I think it's really learning each person's individual ticks and like what, if you have a tough boss, what are the things that they appreciate? And trying to double down on maybe, how you can help them out in the best way possible. I know for me, I always tried to be like, oh, what can I take off my boss's plate? And, even if they don't love me, it'll put me in better favor, right? I'm hoping if your boss is playing favorites or is extremely, not kind and stuff, I think it's perfectly fair to, ask to be switched to another team. Big agencies allow that. Junior or smaller shops, you might want to find another smaller shop if the boss is really just like holding you down and making your life kind of a living hell. It is not meant to be that way. Back to what I said, like the work is hard enough. You don't want the team to also be hard to work with. So you want to surround yourself with good people, and learning people's individual perspectives and how they work is extremely important at all levels. Everybody on my team I treat very differently, not from a respect standpoint, but some people like feedback a certain way. Some people are focusing on different areas, right? And I have to realize that not everybody's the same. And I kind of have to have my, approach when I'm giving feedback to be a little bit different per person. And I feel like you should treat, your bosses, your coworkers, and everyone the same, where, as long as you treat everyone with respect and you're as positive as you can be in any situation, like there shouldn't be a lot of negativity coming your way. And if there is, then it might be more of their problem than yours, though it can quickly turn into your issue. But the goal is ultimately you're always going to just be able to do as best as you can, and that's always enough. And it's important to remember that.
I love this. I wish we had all bosses like you, Kevin. Maybe we'll all relocate to Tracy. You'll have a lot of applications for Tracy.
There you go. Yeah.
So we have Lisselle who's asking a really great question about, and I think that's a question that's probably everybody's kind of thinking about, is like, is it more beneficial when you're beginning is to be like a jack of all trades, or to be somebody who's like specializes in a particular skill in the creative industry? I think that's the $1 million question, and we're always like tiptoeing around it, right?
Yeah. There has been times in the past where I would have said specializing and being amazing, like, finding a gap within an agency, like, hey, I'm going to be the animation person or the 3D person, or hey, I'm a awesome illustrator. Like those are great skill sets to have. I would always, my personal opinion, especially with the emergence of AI and our industry is consistently changing, is I would taste test as much as humanly possible, kind of dabble in everything. That would be what I would look for, is the jack of all trades. The person that can wear a lot of hats, that can take on a multitude of assignments or whatever is thrown their way. Once you have kind of a working knowledge of most things down, then maybe you find the sweet spot of something to be like, oh, I'm gonna, put a little extra time toward this thing. That's been animation for me. I've been dabbling a lot more in animation and being like, oh, and video. So I'm like, okay, though, like I can kind of do a little bit of everything. Those are the places I'm like putting a little bit of extra time. AI as well, learning, how to best integrate that into our day to day. That is the future, and so that's part of it too. But yeah, so jack of all trades versus specialist, at least for a more junior level position.
Thank you for being clear about that. I think that's going to help a lot of people. Guys,
Yeah.
there's so many good questions. I'm trying to get to all of them. Okay, quick question. Is it okay to use Behance for a portfolio, or is it better to have like personal website with name as a domain?
Yeah, I personally prefer personal website. Squarespace and other websites like that make it super, super easy. You can get things up quick. And I'll start to try to have more concise answers for time. But I would go like a Squarespace type of route. It doesn't take that much time and effort. It looks great. It translates to mobile effectively. So Behance is a great place to store some artwork, but I would make your own website.
For sure. I couldn't agree more. And we force everybody through the program. We tell them, you got to make a website.
Yeah.
But it's just a more effective tool. And Behance can be cool as well, right? It can be an added link that you can add so
Yeah,
that people
it's
Google you.
extra. Yeah.
Exactly, it's an extra.
Yeah.
So Paula is asking about 2D, 3D, right? Because mentioning that like, hey, having trouble to figure out how to sell myself with a portfolio when most of my work is 2D, 3D, and gravitating towards 3D, and would love to create like commercials for products with scenes, environment. I don't know if you come across a lot of those types of profiles, but if you have any tips on that.
Yeah, 100%. I think my fastest answer to that would be find the differentiator. And the fact is that more people know 2D than 3D at most shops. So if you can pump up that 3D skill set, it will definitely make you stand out in a sea of other art directors. So if you have a passion or interest in 3D, I would definitely up that 3D in your book. But by no means are you necessarily going to be denying necessarily because you don't have 3D. I think it's important also when you're in an interview that you're just very upfront and straightforward about the things you're trying to grow and get better at. So though you don't have the 3D yet, if you go in and you're like, hey, it's something I'm interested in learning and continuing to grow. If there's projects, I would love to take them on and experiment. That goes a long way.
Love that. Any advice for creative strategists? Because for their portfolio, it's a lot more wording, right? So
Yes.
Vanessa was asking if you had any tips.
Totally, totally. Creative strategists have a slightly different approach. I know I said that 3 to 5 minute thing. That mostly relates to design books, copywriting books. From a strategy perspective, you do need to build a good case. Those cases should be still relatively short in length, but they can be longer than a typical, short blurb, right? You'll definitely want to, hit every, your target. You want to hit every aspect that you thought through strategically and what insights that you found. So, totally cool to lengthen that sucker up a little bit.
Great. A question that actually Laras from our team is asking, because we're getting that question a lot from our participants as well, is like, if you don't have connects or networks, right? Like you're coming in, your parents are not in the field, like you don't have, you don't have it, right? So you're just like coming in fresh. Like, do you have any like tips on how to, build connections, and getting into the art? Because the ad world is also very much everybody knows each other, right? It's like it's kind of a club, right? So how do you get into that club? And any advice on that?
Yeah, so that was me. I knew nobody. I was the only one that I knew that wanted to do what I was doing. And those connects are usually built when you have the job and people go other places, and so your network grows tremendously once you're in. But getting in is difficult, right? The biggest advice I have is to honestly reach out on the typical platforms, LinkedIn, find agencies and clients that you're proud of the work. Find the people that are doing that work, reach out to those people, ask questions and get advice. I've had many people buy me coffee for 30 minutes of my time to just, talk about them. And one of those people ended up being somebody that we hired down the road. So, it's really just putting in the legwork. There are the people who make excuses. I refuse to be one of those people. So for me, when I needed to get in and didn't know anybody, I just was kind of annoying. I reached out to everybody and talked to whoever would talk to me.
Uh, I like that you're getting a lot of free coffees now after that. So guys,
Yeah, exactly.
budget for coffees to invite people, $5, although I would say in New York it would be more $8, but
Yeah, yeah.
budget it out. That's a great advice. That's a great advice. I have a question from Shirina who's asking, like, I have a portfolio as both a designer and also a photographer. Is it acceptable to showcase them together? I think it's a great question because a lot of people are kind of like doubling down,
teetering.
right? Can you show them together, or do you need different sections? Does it need to be two separate websites? Like, how would you go about that?
Yeah, taste testing is important when you don't know what you want to do. So it's okay to be at this stage and be teetering between two. What I will say is they would like a decision. What I would recommend is making them two separate sections of your book, and then sending the link to the photography one when you're going for photography level jobs, and then a link to the design, graphic design, art direction one when you're going for design jobs. Because when they get to that page, it should be all about what they're looking for. Again, to the thing we talked about earlier, if they're looking for an art director, it might be great that you have photography chops, but if there's a lot of sections that they're clicking on that are photography, you'll probably get the boot. So just delineate those sections within your site, and send people to the corresponding one.
Love that. That's a common question also from our participants. So thanks,
Yeah.
Sharon, for asking. A lot of people are
Yeah.
wondering. One last question about typography. How is typography, like, is it important, typography in a portfolio? Like, does it matter? Tell us a bit more about that.
So it depends. Some people are amazing with type, especially like hand done type. And when I see hand done type in a book, I do get a little excited if I'm honest. But really, it's how do you integrate it into your work? I think type, fonts, everything is important to tell a story. So are you, when you have a font on a page, are you thoughtful about what you're using? Like if you're screaming something, it shouldn't be a small little light typeface, right? When you are whispering something, it shouldn't be a big, bold, all caps headline. So having consideration for text, I think is extremely important. When you are looking at an ad, and you see that the kerning's off and the letting's messed up because they kind of worried all about the artwork portion, but they didn't really incorporate the copy. The copy isn't designed. That can definitely be a red flag and a negative for the book. So yes, I think type is extremely important. And particularly if you have type skills like hand-done typography, or 3D type or experimentation, I think that's always a good thing to show.
Perfect. Kevin, you're a legend. I will say it again. I stand by it. Thank you so, so much for offering, just being so real. I really love that about you. And really, really appreciate your time. For everybody, just before we conclude, I'm adding a link here to check your eligibility for the program. If you are interested, you can check out on this link first to see if you're eligible first, before anything else. So adding this link here, you can check us out on our website. Kevin, thank you so much. That was like really, really cool, and would love to do that again with you.
Yeah, totally. Thank you guys so much. And again, if you want to reach out afterwards, I'm on the LinkedIn's, the website, all the stuff. So you know where to find me.
Please check it out, Open Door Creatives, and then Kevin Forister on LinkedIn. You'll find him, no problem. On my first results of the search. So Kevin, thank you so much, everybody. You're awesome. I love that we made almost 50 people here until the end. You guys are here. You're already doing the right thing. Because you're here, you're already doing more than a lot of other people who are not. So best of luck for all of our participants, our applicants potentially. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Thanks, everybody. Oh my God, thank you so much for all the nice comments. Thank you, guys. All right. See you all. Bye, Kevin.